podcasting since 2005. This is the King of Podcasts radio network, kingofpodcasts.com.
It's been long said that pop music runs in a cycle, but it was those days when we had streaming with iPods, not iPhones.
The King of Podcasts radio network proudly presents the Broadcasters Podcast. Here is the King of Podcasts.
Welcome to episode 394 of the Broadcasters Podcast. And before you know it, we'll get to 400 before the summer is up. King of Podcasts here with you. Thank you for joining me for the program. And hey, what did I say about Superman? Look at how well it did this weekend in the box office. What, $220 million? Global box office? It kicked ass. It did very well. 130, I think it was, for domestic. I like the movie. I'll just hit off the bat. You know, I'm not going to put it up there with the Christopher Reeve Superman series, but I mean, I thought it was better than the Brandon Routh series. And I actually thought it was a bit better than what I saw from Man of Steel, believe it or not. I didn't mind the direction he went with some extra stars in there. The casting was right. Yeah, I had to get used to the fact that Superman was getting his ass kicked quite a bit, but, you know, it was more relatable, you could say. And, you know, some of the extra things they brought in there, Mr. Terrific was really good. I like that. Again, it's reinterpretation, and it's the way we look at our comic book universes now anyway. They have multiple allies, all these major superheroes that are not just going standalone, things like that. It's okay. I just think that the basic casting they did pay off. It's what I thought it was going to be when I first saw the trailers for it, some 18 months ago, whatever it was. So it worked out. And that movie's going to do really well. Let's see if it makes $1 billion. It could very well do that. The way it's going, it's not a bad way to go. So tonight we're going to talk about music. And there's an ongoing story I've been talking about here on the program about music being stagnant, because it is. Now, I want to go ahead and apply it to one of the terms that have been used in the music industry, or the radio industry for that matter, called recession pop. I don't know if I really believe in that particular theory, but we're going to talk about it, and we're going to apply what has been said out there for many years, what that's all about. I'll give it a shot. I'm just not very wary about that, but I'm not afraid to go ahead and take that and see what it really means. You know, why not? Luminate put out a mid-year music report. And this is where we're coming from right now, where it really brings up what we have going on today. That recession pop could be a trend. So on-demand streaming is slowing down a little bit. There's a decline in current music volume and a growing interest in pop music. That was what was going on between 2007 and 2012. And that's what was being reported, that there's a slowdown from what was a peak of pop music during that time period right there. On-demand audio streaming is up almost 5% in the first 6 months of the year, equaling about 31 billion more streams at this point in the calendar than there were last year. So there's growth, but not as fast. Last year, there were about 50 billion streams. So they're thinking they're going to get the 60 billion streams in streaming. 60 billion streams, that's a lot. Rock, Latin, country, and Christian/gospel are the genres that are growing the most on demand this year over year. R&B and hip-hop is getting the steepest decline. Yeah, there's not been a lot this year in R&B and hip-hop. The peak of last year with the feud between Kendrick Lamar and Drake amplified it last year, but after that, nobody else has stepped in. We haven't had a lot of new stars come and play, and who we've had on have not really panned out well. Travis Scott put an album earlier, right? And we had Fiend, and we had a couple other songs, and it just kind of came and went. You have now Cardi B that's going to be putting up an album. Let's see how that works out for her. And I'm trying to think who else. Drake's got another album coming up as well. He already had an album that came out that was like kind of a mixtape kind of deal, but wasn't really anything special. But nothing has really stood out that really stands out. Now, according to Jamie Marconet, who's VP of Music Insights and Industry Relations at Luminate, they say that we've seen this in the past when it comes to decreases the current music volume. And R&B and hip-hop as a core genre has lost most of the current volume. Country has actually grown the most. Morgan Wallen's new album has been at the top of the charts, helping to drive that. Again, 37 songs on that album more than a month ago. We talked about that. And that's what's driving country right now. A lot of the songs that go in that Morgan Wallen route, too. Let's just make that point clear, too. Zach Bryan had a big year last year, and country's still on a real mainstream kick at the moment as we speak. So there's the mention of recession pop. And here's what we got. Now, to identify and define what recession pop is, we need to go ahead and go into a couple different links that will explain this right here. So the definition I'm going to give to you from my description on the podcast today. Recession pop is referring to the Great Recession of 2008 to 2012. It's a distinctive genre characterized by euphoric, high energy, and escapist qualities, which was pretty big when times are tough. So the idea is, and this is based on the music cycles theory that Guy Zapoleon, who's a renowned radio consultant, has talked about for years. So if you ever notice, sometimes we have music that when economic times are tough, music always comes around to be something that changes with the times. Because to get our minds off of what is a really bad time, making ends meet, or be able to go anywhere, you want to find an escape. So the escape is the music. So late 70s, when disco music became very popular, that was one of those things where people really got into, going out to the clubs, getting out there, shaking it all out, and just trying to, again, shake the stress and anxiety away. In the 80s, we had more into house music and the start of EDM. Same thing goes into the early 2000s also, right around 9/11 and all. And then we had another recession. And then we had, again, 2008, 2012. It was one of those things where consumer behaviors are evolving, economic anxieties were in place, and it's just the way that pop music changes. And it's true, because pop music kind of defines what the cycle of music is. As we know, pop music defines really what is mainstream music. Of course, I'm always the person of the opinion that pop music is really not so much pop music as it is top 40. In the radio world, I would still say the top 40 songs are the most popular songs. Thus, we say pop music. But we know that phrase has changed over the years, because what popular music was, according to the charts, was what charted. And it didn't matter if it came from soul or country or somewhere else around the world. Whatever was popular would make it to the mainstream. But popular music that was made to be popular, that had a pop sound, we all know what that is. That is always what's been driving the music industry forever, because of the hits. And popular music is also based on the hits that we have. And how many hits do we have? So, in that time, artists that really defined that recession pop period would be Lady Gaga, Kesha, Katy Perry, Flo Rida, because you had upbeat, danceable tracks serving as a temporary escape for the anxieties of the financial crisis. I would say Flo Rida, Pitbull would probably be a part of that mix. I would say there's other that you could say in that mix, but that's a pretty good idea of it. And again, the music cycle has always changed, because when you go through and you see the changes in music where we get high upbeat music, the high energy music always kind of comes in when pop music isn't necessarily holding up. Now, what's interesting about some of those stars they talk about here, when it came to Kesha and Katy Perry, is where you had the sound coming from. Because in every pop music cycle, for many years, it was always that you had songwriters, you had producers that were specifically cranking out those type of hits. So you talk about the Brill Building in the 50s and the 60s, the Wrecking Crew, and the singer-songwriters that were going into the 70s. And then you just kind of follow along. You look into the 90s and you see all the boy bands coming across. You see, the young pop stars that are coming in. because of Max Martin, Dr. Luke, and that Scandinavian sound. Sweden. And sometimes places just came across and gave us music that was mainstream. Very Gordy over at Motown. Same thing goes. Kind of works that way. So there's a return to that kind of music right now. So music streaming is still positive, but nostalgia plays a crucial role. So TikTok, we're seeing, is definitely being a contributing factor. And the same thing goes with their social media, that people are obviously getting into their eras of what brought them joy, what brought them interest. And when the music is not satisfying right now. So like, for instance, we have EDM music, we have house music, we have upbeat music that is playing all around Europe, all around the world. But what happens when pop music is very light, which it has been, we did have an influx last year when you had Sabrina Carpenter and Chappell Roan. And even to some point, Tate McRae, or you could say, just like there was a change up to it. With some of the pop stars we're seeing right now that are trying to move up to the forefront, Rosé, you have the members of Blackpink, and there are others that are trying to make their way through and just find their way into the cycle. But it's very difficult. Record labels are not putting in the money or the time or the process to really build talent because they don't have the interest of it anymore. If they're only going to get paid, 40 cents or whatever it is they're going to make off of streaming for every song that's played, or every, they're going to make minuscule money now compared to what they used to make. So I'm listening to a book called The Song Factory by the author's name is John Seabrook. And the book was from 2015. But one of the things he was making mention of is that, it was 20 years ago that I remember that we all were buying CDs. If you wanted to buy them at full price and you wanted to buy a new album with 12, 14, 15 songs on it, you were paying $16.99, $17 for a new album. And we paid for it. And it wasn't a bad price to us. It was a little pricey, but we're like, yeah, we're going to buy it. And I could tell you I went to Specs or Peaches, and I definitely would I remember spending hundreds of dollars on music to the point of every month, roughly. Because when there was new music that came out, we would find what was going to play on our CD players. And we did it. And that was what a lot of younger listeners now and younger consumers, they don't know what it's like to be on that. Because it was 20 years ago that we started getting into Napster and peer sharing and all the downloadable MP3s you can get. I know I was into it. I've never gotten the Napster myself, but definitely gotten the LimeWire. Definitely gotten the Kazaa. I can remember those. That was definitely into those right at that point. Because the other problem was that if you're going to pirate music, you had to make sure you had, DSL. You couldn't do that on, just the old AOL kind of stuff. You couldn't do that like it was. Like you needed 56 bits to be able to go ahead and get that music down. 56 KB. If you didn't have that, you really couldn't do it. And it took a while for it to get to that point. And I remember that time we just had one computer in the house, and it was sitting in one bed in the den, and it was like, they go and find time to go and get on. And it wasn't that easy to get on as much as people would like to do. But now everything's so portable and so easy to get online that, we did get streaming 10 years ago. That also made a change for all of us, that our music tastes are different. And the music that they talk about, you could say here, might still apply, but I don't necessarily know if it does. So Guy Zapoleon, as I mentioned, he's a radio consultant that's been around for a long time. He explains that pop music goes through a cycle. 10-year cycles. And I've heard this before. So you have phrases like birth or pure pop, extremes and doldrums. So it's an ebb and flow of musical styles. The 15-year gap since the initial recession pop boom places this revival perfectly within the cycle of generational nostalgia. So those coming of age during the Great Recessions are now looking back fondly on the music of their youth. TikTok is helping to go and really amplify that, as I said. So the desire for escapism and familiarity is driving consumers towards catalog music, which is music more than 18 months or older, accounting for 75.8% of market share of total U.S. audio streams in the first half of 2025. Now, they talk about recession now, which there has been a recession going on for several years, worldwide. And right now there's supposedly a recovery from that recession going on as we speak. Not there yet. There's a whole lot left to go. So at the moment, stars are going to be a part of this. Chaperone, Hurley, XCX should also be brought into that pop front as well. So escapism is what we're talking about. Now, Guy Zapoleon actually talked about this more into his report of the mid-year 2025. So he's talking about right now that we're in the doldrums period of the 10-year music cycle. So Guy Zapoleon has written a recent article that says that in the last 5 years, we've been at the lowest level of consensus hits. At least 50% of top 40 stations powering a song at one point. So new music consuming pop stations. That if you're listening on the radio, the newest songs are consuming what everybody's listening to all the time. Because there's so many new songs to play. So many current songs to play. But we know that in radio in the last few years, a lot of these stations, some stations that were playing current music have gone into a different format where they're playing more gold or recurrent. Like you said, catalog music. That you're not playing the songs from the year of. You're playing them from several years ago or even farther back. Because you're trying to fill the void of what music is out there. Because there's not enough songs that are becoming bona fide, worldwide, knock 'em out hits. So I mentioned a while back the article from Billboard, hit songs are lasting longer on the charts, but why? And he referred to it as a mega hit stagnation on the Hot 100, dating May 24th. 0 songs in the top 10 had spent a single-digit number of weeks on the chart. But we have to think about the fact of why is this going on like this? Why is it that music is not coming out with new music? Okay, the music industry, the record labels are not putting out enough new music that would normally fill the coffers of radio stations and streamers with new music. They're not putting out albums. They're not putting out a lot of singles. That's the part. This has opened room for a lot of other music to come out. New artists get a chance to go and jump into the limelight here. And usually this is when we go ahead and discover new artists we never heard of before. And this is like usually in these kind of areas of the music cycle, we get new stars and all of a sudden, boom, here we go. Because that's how it happens. Put it to you like this. Sometimes in the doldrums of what music is, right? Okay, say like when we had the Beatles and the Stones and the British Invasion and that whole pop cycle that came in the 60s. Late 60s, you go into psychedelic, you go into other areas. Soul music is a real big push. And then you get songs from artists like the Carpenters that all of a sudden become big. Elton John comes into that period in 1970. And you start seeing the stars that will become big stars and you'll have a sustained career. I look at the early 80s and then you look at, we're coming off of disco. And a lot of slow music coming in. And then the change of artists that were coming into there. Kenny Rogers comes into big play. Then you start getting into Michael Jackson, who gets really big. Then you get the Prince. You get the Madonna. And then so on and so forth. Big stars come out to them. 1990, right? We had a period in the late 80s, early 90s where Latin freestyle was on the charts. When you had, dance hits on the charts. Not so much pop. And even if you did, or you had like New Jack Swing kind of feel songs to it. It was just like the 80s still kind of like crossing over into something else. And Mariah Carey all of a sudden 1990 blasts into the music scene and just kills it. And there will be more that come after that. Celine Dion comes out of that period. And then, Whitney Houston really picks up at that period as well. And then that's where things go. It's like, well, we move along. And with some artists, they might go ahead and pan out bigger than others. But like the thing is that we would have moments where the music industry goes through this kind of cycle and we would see the next crop of stars come in. I mean, at the end of the 2000s, there was a bit of a doldrums as well because then Billie Eilish all of a sudden came through. The 2020s, excuse me. So 2019 into the 2020s, and then Billie Eilish comes in a little bit right around the end of 2019. maybe you could say 2018 specifically, right? And then you go to Olivia Rodrigo that comes in and she hits it out of the park. It's just what happens. We get then artists that are just with lasting power because of just the time period to come in and then they take off. You can almost apply the same thing where we had a slowdown of music when it comes to the late 90s where Backstreet Boys came in, Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, and then American Idol came into play and changed things up. So Kelly Clarkson comes into play. Carrie Underwood comes into play. And that's just another change. Matt Bailey wrote a story about linger factor on his graphsabout.songs.com website. And the limit for how long a song can remain on the Hot 100 in the top 10 has grown ever longer with every methodological and technological update. Lose Control, Teddy Swims, has been on the charts more than any song in chart history other than Blinding Lights by The Weeknd. Now, consecutively, it's been up there, almost 100 weeks now, I want to say. It's a crazy number now. If I just look at what we have in terms of the numbers as we speak, let's go into that real quick. The current listing of the charts right now, just to give you the number of weeks on the charts of the songs we have. This is the mid-year chart that if you're going to count everything that Billboard does in terms of points, in terms of their methodology on what they chart right now of the year-end songs. If we had a year-end list of 2025 right now, your top 10 would be this. Love Somebody, Morgan Wallen, that's 38 weeks on the chart. APT, Rose Bruno Mars, would be up there, 38 weeks on the chart. Espresso, Sabrina Carpenter, a 2024 hit, would be charting now at number 8, year end. I Had Some Help, Morgan Wallen, Post Malone, that's a 2024 song. Also a chart, 61 weeks on the chart. Benson Boone, Beautiful Things, 76 weeks on the chart, and that would be number 6 right now. Lose Control, Teddy Swims, 99 weeks on the chart, and that would be the 5th most listened to song in the country. Most popular song in the country right now, if we were at the end of 2025. Birds of a Feather, Billie Eilish, 60 weeks on the chart. These top 10 songs, except for APT was last year as well. These are not, any of these are 2025 songs. Bar Song, Tipsy, Shabuzi, 65 weeks on the chart. The only song actually that even comes in from this year, and I don't even know if it does. Wait, no, it doesn't. Luther actually was a 2024 song. Kendrick Lamar and SZA. And Down with a Smile, also a 2024 song. And that's where we are. And that's based on the fact that all those songs have crossed over a billion or a billion plays in airplay. In their sales, there's differentiation where they might have sold between 3,000 and 5,000 units digitally, as they've done, or physical units, whatever it is. And that's where they are. It's impressive. Not a lot of 2025 songs on here. Even if we go back farther down, That's So True, TV Off, Pink Pony Club, Timeless. We're going down here. Let me go top 20. Okay, Not Like Us, Taste, Squabble Up, I'm the Problem. Ordinary would be a 2025 song. Messy Little Young, 2024 song, right? It's that's where we are. There is not that much music coming out now. So, as Guy Zapoleon might be giving us the point of this music cycle, it's in a worse space than it ever has. That says everything for you right there. Back to Guy Zapoleon here. He does say that there is a rebirth on the horizon. Because the trend is to be now is that they feel like music is not going to go ahead and be so reliant upon new music all the time. That not a lot of people are going to be listening to new music as much as they did. And that it's okay if there's only so much new music coming out. Now, in the graphs about songs point, they made a thing about where they looked at basically the rock and roll era, the 60 years plus of the Billboard Hot 100. So, paper reporting, just sales going out there. 1958 to 1991. The average length of a song in the top 10 at any one time of the year would be at the most 12 weeks. In the SoundScan era, which is when all sales of records would be digitally compiled officially, all of it will be compiled that way. And then also it was a change of the chart itself because they would change the way it was constructed. That the Hot 100 was no longer the mainstream chart that was going to be applied. Is that with the change of music, you wouldn't necessarily have the sales figures you would have that would show, look at the variety of music that we have. Like, it would be control of what hits would be more prominent than others. So, when you have maybe like rap or country or other outside music, outside of popular music, out of pop music was going to stay strong. Meanwhile, the other genres are not going to go and hold up so much because people are not buying so much of those records like they would be popular music because of the hits. 18 weeks on average would a song be in the top 10. In the iTunes era, which was 2006 to 2017, the SoundScan era was 1991 to 2005. So when iTunes first came on, average a song might be in the top 10, 25 weeks. And now in the current day streaming era from 2018 to current day, 42 weeks is the average time a song might be in the top 10. If you look at streaming as listens versus a one-time purchase of a song, you have fragmentation caused by so many different platforms that listeners use to consume music. All that helps because a song will last much longer on the streaming charts. So it's limiting the amount of new songs and new artists breaking through. It's not good. I don't like that part. Then you have a consensus paralysis with fewer consensus hits, where we don't have a mainstream that can absolutely say, okay, this artist is a big deal. There's not that many. They're able to go and cross through that spectrum to get to the very top. And everybody knows who they are. We're not going to get those type of stars. And if we do, it all depends on the fact that you have certain stars that have to go in. You either got to go to, their own, go to big festivals and get noticed, or you have to go ahead and piggyback off of somebody else. Like Sabrina Carpenter, for her to get the big shows that she's doing right now. She was working on the Taylor Swift Eras tour. She was a opening act, and that helped her out tremendously. That she got the endorsement of Taylor Swift. That's why people followed her anyway in their career anyway, which was great. And good for her. And Chapel Roan, when she had her album out, it took a while for that to go and take off, and now she's off to a run. Tate McRae also took a while to go and get herself off to a run and get somewhere. But now what happens in radio, and what happens in streaming as well, by the way, because of the listener habits now, whether you are streaming your music or streaming on a live station or listening on an AM FM station, which FM station, come on, or satellite, to be honest. There's the industry belief that current music is completely faded and replaced with gold consumption, which means songs from a couple of years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever. So Illuminate now declares older songs, which are at least 18 months or older, 70% of the music market. And new music takes up 30%. And it continues to shrink. Between the period of 2020 to 2023, popular music, pop music, if you're not counting holiday music, makes up 87% of songs that played between 2020 and 2025 on Spotify. They go for that they want music that's within the last few years, but they're not listening to just new music. Stations and streaming platforms right now are showing signs of embracing a more broader definition of hits right now. And that's one thing that's actually pretty good, is that we're getting a diversity of hits, because even the streamers have to understand, okay, if you don't have all this new music, these record companies that want to build out these big stars to go ahead and get them out there, put them out albums, put out singles, do the whole cycle, because they don't have the faith, nor do they want to put the investment into a star that's going to fail, because they can't afford to have a star fail anymore. Not like they used to, when they had a whole lot of money coming in because of the physical units they were selling. When they don't have that anymore, they have never figured out a plan. Never had a good idea. They might have tried to go and latch on to digital downloads, but that went away. And it never really did anything to work with the streaming services. They are kind of somewhat, but they only can get so far with being on there. Because everything is so homogenized. Like to get your music onto Spotify, I mean, it still comes down to, if you want to have a national list into that today's top hits or Apple Music's top hits, that's a 50-song list of everything around the country, or even around the world for that matter. Very tough. But Spotify's today's top hits, Apple Music, even top 40s are now playing country pop, pop rock, R&B, hip hop, and some alternative. It's a healthy musical ecosystem. This is what is called a rebirth phrase, a strong balance of rock, pop, rock, and alternative in 2025. Pop and R&B all reassert themselves as major hit genres. It's a great sign for a healthy music cycle when you see the genre fusion, because they're talking about the fact that now we have artists that are also taking from other genres. They're not just straight out pop hits. So genre collaborations, Post Malone, Tate McRae working with Morgan Wallen on various hits. Genre fusion with artists like Chappell Roan, Shabuzi, Teddy Swims, either giving you a country feel, a soul feel, a pop feel, whatever it is. Then you have pop with an R&B feel to it, or R&B with a pop feel to it, melodic, SZA, Weeknd, Doja Cat, all fit in the last 5 years for that. Pop rock and alternative pop, that would be Benson Boone, Hozier, Teddy Swims. Alternative, you have Lola Young that's come out with, with a hit and also coming in a little bit more. The Maria is also coming out as well with a moderate hit top 40. And then you have superstars on all these different genres. Morgan Wallen ruling country, Sabrina Carpenter ruling pop. Kendrick Lamar is the hit. It's the biggest in hip hop and R&B in general. But of course, other genres like Latin, country, or alternative and rock are getting the exposure they deserve. They're not getting the exposure. So what happens there? Like, even for myself, I know that my change of music right now, of my current music, when I listen to it, if I had to broadcast a radio station now, if I had to program a music station right now of just popular music, it would be tough. Because at least where I'm at in South Florida, we have a very large Latin contingency, obviously, so playing Latin music would be something I would definitely do quite a bit of. I would put a station out that would cater bilingual, English and Spanish. That's my personal feel to it. And make it upbeat. The other thing, too, is that I look at genres from other areas. That is focused here on the program as well. Like even for the Latin music, if I go into corridos or if I go into reggaeton that's not just from the Caribbean or not just from South America. Now we're getting it from, or we are getting it from South America, we're getting it from Argentina. Or we're getting, that's La Huaquia that's down there. Or Danny Flo that's in Mexico, doing a new style of reggaeton over here. Then we have Brazilian funk that's also coming into place, right? And then when it comes to music, you have EDM. You have Afro beats that's kind of replacing the R&B sound that's out there. But now the R&B stars or just music that's out there with an R&B tinge, it's Afro beats now. You can feel like an Afro beat feel. Like there's a dembo to it. There's a feel, a lushness, a tropical feel to the songs now that are coming out. And even Latin music is taking that, picking up on that as well. K-pop. When there's not the, your pretty pop stars that are out there, not as many. Look at what we have right now. When Blackpink decided to go and break, go on the singles runs, try to put some songs out there, see what happens. That's where you get Rosé and Jennie and Lisa and all these other stars coming into play to see what happens. Same thing with BTS, breaking them off with, Jin, and I forget the other names. Trust me, I don't know all the BTS names. I just know they're out there and doing stuff. But that's what's filling the space. Because what else is there? So when we have these phases, as we mentioned, even going into the change of music that we have, we get open up to new music, new styles, new everything. Every time we kind of move along. So when you think about late 70s to early 80s, new wave was starting to come into play. It was the dominant music over punk. and anything else coming out, but also just originate from Britain, which Britain always stays ahead of things. We always know about that. Great Britain. Love you guys. Always a tastemakers when it comes to music. Always pay attention to it. That's why I always listen over to BBC Radio 1, hear their chart show, because I notice they're on top of things. But even they right now are feeling the doldrums, as they say here, where music is just not hitting that much. There's not a lot of new music to go and work off of. Even though I might hear songs over there in Britain that will not cross over here. Because America, there's just not a room for it. We don't have the radio stations that are allowed to go and open up things up. And that's what's not happening. Now, in this story, talk about the fact that we've had examples of years where the doldrums would become transition phases. So 82 to 83. So we really had the change where music changed. Prince came out, pop alternative, Human League, Soft Cell, Go-Go's, Motel. Motels were all part of that new wave sound to it. You had R&B with the Daz Band, rock with Joan Jett, John Mellencamp, or John Cougar Mellencamp. 95, 96, 97, you had genre collaborations with Mariah Carey, Janet Jackson, Boyz II Men, pop with the Backstreet Boys, R&B with you had hip-hop with Tupac, Cool J, TLC, you had the pop rock sound with Alanis Morissette, Goo Goo Dolls, Sheryl Crow, and right now we're getting a country pop rock crossover in 24 and 25 with Benson Boone, Teddy Swims, Post Malone, Shabuzi, Beyonce getting into the country mix, who knows what else. So yes, we're getting a little more diversity in the charts, but still not a lot of new music, which you would like to think that there's a lot of artists out there that have good music that can go ahead and get promoted and pushed and marketed, and we can hear new music all the time. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of new music that comes out. But one of the biggest things that a lot of listeners will go and say right now today is they'll say they don't have lasting power. There's not quality to it. And it is something to be said about the difference of the music that we consume right now that's all being produced digitally. Like how many artists are out there actually using instruments? Completely instruments and nothing but. Country does quite a bit. They don't necessarily have to use a lot of beat machines and other things to go ahead and replicate. Drum machines, whatever. It's a bit of a change. But we noticed that it was a different time when you had artists going into the studio, putting out music, and the attention to detail that was out there. And also there wasn't so many songs that were out there that already had the 3-chord structure that we already were familiar with. It's one thing to be said about certain songs where people will just go and just sample instead of just cover. Or, now, but you think about it, nobody covers songs anymore. Rarely does it even happen. But there's more enough sampling out there to give a little bit of a change going on to music. And that's the part where I can't stand it. When I hear certain songs just get fully sampled. No wonder a song's going to go and do really well if you got the sample. Little Boo thing, Paul Russell. I mean, the emotions have been paid 100% for that song right there. I mean, the emotions should be getting the deal that Steely Dan got off Lord Tariq Peter Guns for Deja Vu. Uptown Baby. Just saying. Now, one of the biggest areas we got to go and focus on when it comes to all this is for the record labels, where are they getting their money? Because now it's very typical. Streaming revenue now is coming from outside the U.S. For major companies like Spotify. In 2024, global music industry revenue is expected to reach $28.6 billion. The fastest growing markets for music streaming are Asia, Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East, where major music companies have fewer resources. Emerging markets are forecast to make up 70% of new streaming music by 2030. And major labels are losing market share because independents are offering new artists far better terms. And by the way, there's also now just artist management representation, where who needs the record label to go and give you some contract? Well, you just find manager for an artist that will find their way through without having to go to the route of anything else. And that's the biggest change that's been going on here. Major labels still have a stranglehold on the biggest acts and the most valuable catalogs, but they're not going anywhere because they'll expect more consolidation. So they're just going to merge with each other and continue to go and pick up whatever they can to continue to survive. Now, Guy Zapoleon also makes the point about radio when it comes to trying to get back to basics. I've always said this many times before. If radio would get back to a point where they would be the gateway for music to go and become popular, like let that be the starting point when there are big acts with new music, and then they trickle down into streaming. Like it's the immediate, okay, simultaneous, synchronized. Here's a song hitting big on radio, and then immediately goes to streaming, and people can go and catch it right then and there. But we don't have that yet. Stations can actually attract a younger audience. One of the stations right now that's actually doing really well, according to his survey here, or this research, is now 102.3 FM in Edmonton, Canada, which is a station I haven't heard yet, but I have to go find it. But younger audiences primarily live on streaming platforms or TikTok. And by the way, with TikTok, I mean, what a wonderful thing you've been doing right now, where if you have yourself attached to the Spotify, that when you find a song that's being played in the soundtrack of whatever TikTok video you're watching in your FYP, the fact you can just hit a plus sign where it says Spotify, you see the song title and name, and you can hear it. You're like, I want to keep that song. Then you hit the plus button, and it automatically saves into your save lists of like songs. And then I can just put it to whatever place I want to put it. It's really great. So radio needs a vastly reduced commercial load, a smaller spot load, and shorter stop sets. But nobody's doing that. Also, to talk about the fact that there needs to be more personalities. Radio needs to take more shots on raw talent. Experience is not always necessary, but we need to increase our efforts as an industry to find and develop new personalities who can connect to our audience. I don't know where you're going to go and do that. I mean, who's going to go ahead and make the plan to find new talent? That was according to Hubbard Radio Executive Vice President of Programming and Audience Development, Greg Strassel. He said earlier this year. But you're talking about corporate radio companies expecting them to go and do that, but they're not. They're just not going to. But one of the things that I talked about before is that does that 10-year music cycle still last right now? Because as we said, we're basically in 5 years of doldrums right now when it comes to music. It was before COVID. Whatever changed, it just kind of changed everything up. Back in June, there appeared to be some return for hope in the music industry to a healthy music balance. Because Top 40 radio, or contemporary hit radio, started getting a little more diversity with a different genre, with acts like Post Malone and Shaboozey combining hip-hop and country, and the rest of the top 10 filled with rock, pop, and R&B hip-hop hits that were charting. So there was some diversity going on, especially in the chart last year. When you look at this time last year and what was on the charts, remember? The chart ending June 22nd, 2024, okay? Lose Control, Teddy Swims was already on that chart. You had Bar Some Tipsy that was already on that chart by then. But there was a difference here because Sabrina Carpenter's Short and Sweet album had not hit yet, but a couple of big hits came off there on singles with Espresso and Please, Please, Please. I Had Some Help. Post Malone, Morgan Wallen was the number one song of that time. $1 Million Baby, Tommy Richmond came out, which is, again, now we know is a one-hit wonder. Not Like Us, Kendrick Lamar. So you were in the heat of the Kendrick Lamar Drake battle. Too Sweet by Hozier. Houdini by Eminem. Birds of a Feather, Billie Eilish in its early part of the run. And Lose Control. And that's what we actually had. So there was quite a bit of variety going on. And it's a pretty good chart right there. You know, in that top 10 of what we had. We have stagnation. If you look at the media-based chart, which I can see here on this website, of what songs are being played right now that are the biggest songs right now in the country, according to the 10-year music, according to Guy Zapoleon right now, in his mid-year survey, the current list, this is, I think, at the end of June, he puts this out, of your top 10 songs. It's Okay, I'm Okay, Tate McRae is number 10. Beautiful Things, number 9. Dancing in the Flames, The Weeknd's 8? Really? Wow. Billie Eilish, Birds of a Feather is 7. Shaboozey, Bar Song is 6. Rudy Carpenter, Espresso, 5. Hozier, Too Sweet, 4. Die With a Smile, 3. Taste, 2. Stargazing, Miles Smith, number 1 song. What? That doesn't even make sense. And those are a lot of songs that have gotten old. Like Miles Smith, if I'm right, all these songs right here in this list, the top 10, they're all 2024 songs. They're not from this year. None of them. Not one. Not a one. And if I even go back farther in the list, Apple, Charlie XCX, APT, The Door. I Can Do It With a Broken Heart. Lose Control. Please, 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 Sabrina Carpenter. Megan Trainor, Criminals. I've never heard that song. I know it was out there, but I didn't really hear about it. I Am Not Okay, Jelly Roll. Bed Kim, Sabrina Carpenter. And Post Malone, I Had Some Help, featuring Morgan Wallen. That's top 20 of Media Base, their current chart. That's wild. Like, what's going on here? They're so late to the game right now as we speak. And one thing that's also going to be said as well is that the most songs we had that were consensus, right? They were just biggest hit sales, biggest hit streaming, biggest hits radio. We're getting less and less of those songs every year. In 2020, we had 28 songs that would be considered consensus hits. Every demographic, every metric, it was number one. Now, it's dropped to 19 in 2024. And will continue to drop. The upcoming list right now for the Billboard Hot 100. Here's what we got right now. Okay. Down with a Smile is expected to be predictably number 10. Luther, What Did I Miss, which debuted this week at number 2, will stay in the top 10. Love Me Not Raven Lene will make it into the top 10 this coming week for the week ending July 26th, just to give you the heads up. Shabuzi's still going to be up there. Just in Case, What I Want from Morgan Wallen will still be up there. Then you have the song from the K-pop Demon Hunter soundtrack, Golden, that is now, was number 6 last week, will be number 3 most likely. Justin Bieber has a new album and a new song, Daisies, that came out. That should be up to number 2, but it will be not enough. A Justin Bieber song, you would imagine, will not be enough to knock ordinary Alex Warden off the top of the charts. He'll still be up there. I mean, what does that mean in the whole spectrum of things? It's incredible that we're at that point where music is just so stagnant. And what else can we do? Six weeks is number 1. And that's not counting how many weeks it was, at number 1 over in the UK. I think it was 11 weeks at number 1 for Ordinary. Nothing else to go up against it. But one of the areas that's being talked about right now about what would change the music industry to get it back to where it should be is the fact that there are not record labels that will try to do right by an artist, which that doesn't normally happen, but still. If there's not money to be made by the record labels for artists, they're not making that much money in songwriting or in music they're putting right now on streaming. So Jeff Robhan wrote in Hollywood Reporter about that songwriters, in order to earn a living wage, Spotify must step in. That the same old rules that build Spotify's empire are still starving songwriters. What can Spotify do to fix that? So they make the point that Spotify didn't solely cause the songwriter crisis. The disappearing royalty checks, the broken splits, the vanished middle class of music creators, but it sits right in the center of it. Now, Spotify, they say, did not rise because of cozy deals. It rose in spite of them. Sharp strategy, relentless vision, and a little help from the majors, handing over equity in exchange for early access, paid off for Spotify. So think about it like this. Spotify right now, as a market value, is worth $145 billion. It's worth more than most of the companies it licenses music from. Universal, which is at the very top, $56 billion valuated. Warner, $15.5 billion. Now, Spotify's recent decisions have made an adversary out of the songwriter class, taking on significant criticism in the business last year for electing to pay out less to songwriters through a controversial bundling strategy with audiobooks, which caused the Mechanical Licensing Collective to sue the company. Spotify would win that case earlier this year as the suit was dismissed. And that so far with what has been done with Spotify, publishers have already lost $230 million for what they've been doing right now, where they added audiobooks to their platform. Now, Spotify did say earlier this year, it has paid in the last 2 years royalties in the amount of $4.5 billion to songwriters and publishers. Right now, Spotify is pushing to boost subscribers by packaging music with audiobooks, helping its bottom line. But it's dragging songwriter royalties down with it. So Spotify needs to take on songwriters' lousy terms because everyone else is compromised. Legacy music companies benefit from the current model and are mired in conflicts by housing both record labels and publishers' interests. Because right now, the music labels are not worried about new artists. They're worried about how much money they can make on their catalogs of artists they've already had out there. That's where the money's really been these days. So publishers, representing songwriters, answer to their bosses, the people overseeing the record companies. Less a push and pull than a noose where one side is looking to maximize profits by minimizing payouts to the ancillary non-artist players that their colleagues represent. And that leaves about 100,000 songwriters without an unencumbered advocate at the table. So not making enough money. Not much at all. So they talk about how much is it that Spotify could really pay off of what they make that would make the difference. Well, Josh Rabin says that if Spotify were just using 3% of its 2024 net profit, which was about $39 million, to boost payouts for qualifying songwriters, it wouldn't be life-changing for most, but it would cover health insurance, which neither record companies nor publishers provide. But what about if Spotify would grant 1% ownership in the company to songwriters? 1% shifts the entire landscape. A 1% equity stake, which is $1.45 billion, could be placed into a irrevocable 30-year trust, designed and governed by a writer-led organization in partnership with labels, performance rights organizations, which is like BMI or ASCAP, and publishers. So it would be an industry-rooted cooperative body with shared oversight and aligned interests. And the trust will be repaid gradually through revenue generated by writers themselves, supported by promotional contributions from labels, publications, PROs, and all broadcast platforms, or all entities whose profit from the use of songs. If you manage it, it could yield 5% annually, generate $72.5 million a year. That could finally fund the kind of infrastructure writers have always deserved. And a third of that, 50,000 eligible writers, could actually get basic health coverage, career services, a 401k, access to a songwriter-focused credit union, and it could also support emergency relief, innovation grants, and profit sharing. And after 30 years, full ownership of the stake would transfer to the songwriter community outright. Not a payout, a future, but built by people who power the product. Oh, that's interesting. You're asking for a lot of favors, a lot of asks of all the music community, the PROs, the songwriters, to all buy in on this. It's a pipe dream. But it is indicative of the fact of how much money that the streamers could put out there to help support the industry. But it's not dependent on the music industry or the streaming industry to support the songwriters, Josh. That should be radio. And as we said many times before, radio should be paying more in royalties. I made that clear. I don't care what the NAB thinks. I'm not going to their conventions. They don't buy me to go and go over there. I don't get anything from that. But I think it's an absolutely valid point to me that if you want something to be taken care of, then why not get something happening to where radio stations are actually paying out? I mean, I think that's a reasonable ask. If you ask me, I wouldn't see why they couldn't do that. All right, I have a couple other quick stories to just drop in here before we can wrap things up. One of the stories we've been following along with right now for several months is the fate of NPR and PBS and their public funding. Well, U.S. Senate have approved a rescission package, including $1.1 billion for the next 2 years of money that would be allotted to the Corporation for Public Broadcasting to fund public media. So now the government will no longer fund public media, according to what they're saying here. The CEO of NPR said that public media directly harms their communities and constituents if it's defunded, and that public radio has a role in delivering emergency alerts. So this rescission request, which was submitted by the White House in June, under the law, if Congress fails to act before the 45-day deadline, the targeted funds must be spent as originally appropriated. But now the House is expected to consider the Senate's revised bill before midnight on Friday, and by next week, the House could vote and go forward with the rescissions to where the federal funding of NPR and PBS will be gone for the next 2 years. A major change in what happens to those outlets and that media in general. The other thing I wanted to bring up before we wrap things up. Oh, two other things actually. Because, okay, first of all, a major change in the late night. CBS is canceling The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. So this is not Stephen Colbert being fired or being let go. This is the fact that CBS, under the tutelage of Paramount, which is undergoing a merger with Skydance Media, as a financial decision, the show as of next year, May 2026, The Late Show will be going off the air. There will be no replacement. We don't know what's going to go in that time slot. We also know that the show after The Late Show with Taylor Tomlinson also got canceled this year, which was the previous James Corden show. But either which way, CBS is getting out of late night for cost-cutting measures. It just costs too much money to do late night shows, which is true. Jimmy Fallon only does 4 nights a week right now. Seth Rollins lost his in-house band, right, for his show. So late night's not going to be so much of an importance anymore. Now, according to a statement from CBS executives, they say that this is purely a financial decision against a challenging backdrop in late night. It is not related in any way to the show's performance, content, or other matters happening at Paramount. And I believe that. If they could afford to go and keep doing the show, I think they would absolutely do it. For Stephen Colbert, that means he's gotten over 10 years to go and run that show after David Letterman. Good for him. He's had quite a career in television and doing political work with the Colbert Report on Comedy Central, and that's what really led him to get into this spot where he was at. So who knows what could go on with him? My guess, Stephen Colbert, he could be tapped into going into the cable news realm if he wanted to go that route. I wouldn't be surprised if he did, because there'd be money out there for him if he wanted to take it. But again, does he need the work? There are over 200 staffers that actually work on the program. That's amazing to have that many people. Tells you how much it is. But now, there's a lot of things that are going on in here as well about Skydance Media and the merger that's closing in now, that one of the other shows that might not last long enough might be Jon Stewart and The Daily Show, which right now, Jon Stewart hosts one broadcast of The Daily Show each week, but there's scrutiny from the executives at Skydance Media, which is slated to acquire Paramount Global, the parent of both CBS and Comedy Central. We already know we had the After the Midnight show with Taylor Tomlinson that also got let go after 2 years. Now, according to this, they said that she decided to leave after to focus on her stand-up, but CBS had saw a third season of the show. But people are seeing that late night programming is in decline. We just don't have there's not the appeal of it anymore. People are not, when people are about to go to bed, they're not putting on their TV to go and watch TV to go to sleep. They're not thinking about that when they can go right to their phone and watch. That's the way it is. Young people are the very first consumers, jumping first to new streaming behaviors that are less tied to watching shows at a specific date and time. So, while hosts like Jimmy Fallon, Jimmy Kimmel, and Colbert generate headlines and digital memes and have sizable live audiences on the networks, Covet, which is roughly combined, I think, 4 million viewers total with all those shows, but less so, and the ranks of the hosts have narrowed in recent years and episodes of the shows. Actually, it's 4 nights a week for all these shows. I didn't realize that. Fallon actually is the last one that give up doing Friday nights, but now they do. So what's going to be left in late night? Saturday Night Live. Because for them, they've been able to get some big advertisers come on board when they did the 50th season. They got Allstate, T-Mobile, and other big spending advertisers to go ahead and promote on those. And that show's doing well, and obviously is getting headlines every week for what they're doing over there. A 1 day a week commitment to appointment works, but then also at the same time, Saturday Night Live does really good when they're getting their word out there, and clips keep going out there and getting shared online pretty frequently. So, and finally, there was a story I did bring up because I talked about It Ends With Us, the Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni mess. So Blake Lively is hit, and this is about a smear campaign claim that she did because the judge has dismissed the case against Justin Baldoni's social media guru, Jed Wallace. So back in December, Blake Lively said that there was a Texas-based social media guru that ran an untraceable smear campaign against her to support Justin Baldoni. And on Wednesday, a judge granted the motion to dismiss himself as a defendant in the case, Jed Wallace. The ruling was made without prejudice. So it continues to be said that Blake Lively, according to say what the judge is saying, is that the Lively did not prove her case, that New York is the proper venue for Wallace to be sued. But I don't think she's going to do much farther with all that anyway. We'll see what goes. Not good. Not good for Blake Lively. Continues to kind of fall in the realm of, I don't know, like Amber Heard, I feel like. Like we're not going to hear much of her. And the same thing goes for Ryan Reynolds. I better hope that he likes that Mint Mobile money. Not like we're going to see him in another Deadpool, I think. That's my guess anyway. King of Podcasts is where you find all my content. kingofpodcasts.com. Of course, at King of Podcasts on YouTube, X, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Come back next week for another wrestling. Come back for another Broadcasters podcast. Remember that content is king, and the control of your content is in your hands.